And as is proper, I am married and my wife Celeste is present in this assembly. Permit me also to recognize her and to recognize the young Aloysius Suleiman who carries out activities. Let me preface my submission by indicating that I have written a fully blooded paper which I hope will be circulated. And that therefore my interaction this morning will be to highlight some of the key issues which are not unfamiliar to all of us, but which are critical as we look at governance in the continent of Africa. It is here in Nigeria that you say that if you do not know where the rain started beating you, you will not know when you started drying. And there is wisdom in the saying. Many times now, when we talk about governance in Africa, and we talk in the so-called United Kingdom, the War of the Roses lasted for 100 years. In Europe, they cut down the throats of their kings and queens. It is the home of the French Revolution. It is the home of the bourgeois revolution. It is the home of the Bolshevik Revolution. It is the home of two major tribal wars, which they call the World Wars, into which we were forcibly included. Misgovernance is not uniquely African. Coup d'etats are not uniquely African. We'll remember the events very recent. In Portugal, the Carnation Revolution. We'll remember the collapse of Yugoslavia. We'll remember the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. And we also know that there is an ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. Misgovernance is not uniquely African. And therefore, let us not judge ourselves too harshly. In Asia, who among you here will forget the war between India and Pakistan? Who among you here will forget the recent conflicts in Sri Lanka and in Bangladesh, in Thailand, the coup d'etats in Indonesia? Who among you here will forget the wars in Latin America, coup d'etats in Brazil, in Argentina, in Chile, in El Salvador, in Nicaragua, in Colombia? Misgovernance is not uniquely African. And when we talk about Africa, it's because she is the mother continent. Our continent has been humiliated through slavery. History teaches us that 12,000 ships left the shores of Africa to take our kith and kin to the Caribbean, and that 1.8 million of them died We never talk about those who died upon landing there. We have been humiliated and dehumanized through slavery. We were enslaved by the Europeans. It was not enough. When the project of enslavement lost its luster, they introduced yet another diabolical scheme, colonization. And through that colonization, they sat down in Berlin in 1884 and 1885 and divided us into spheres of influence. The French had their own, the Germans had their own, the British had their own, the Portuguese had their own, the United Kingdom or the English had their own, the Italians had their own, the Belgians had their own, and they sowed the seed of discord and mistrust in us. They came here and told the Hausa and the Fulani, the Yoruba are no good, and vice versa. They told the Igbo the same thing. They told the Kanuri the same thing. They told the Kalabari the same thing. Divide and rule was the philosophy that governed them. And we fought back because the black man has always fought back. As I stand here, I can, courtesy of history, see the fight back from the Caribbean. Sylvester Williams in Trinidad and Tobago, holding the Pan-African meetings. We fought back. I can still see Marcus Garvey telling us to come back to the mother continent. We fought back. We fought back in the Caribbean. We fought back in the United States of America. Great names emerge. John Henry Clark, W.E.B. Du Bois, Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Carter G. Woodson. We fought back. Then we met in 1945 in Manchester at the Pan-African Conference meeting, and on that occasion, the continent of Africa was represented. Kwame Nkrumah was there. Kamuzu Banda was there. Kenya's Jomo Kenyatta was there. Nigeria's Obafemi Awolowo was there. They were there. And we came back and fought the colonial project. And the colonial project was defeated. We can still hear the words of the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah in March of 1957, telling all who are listening that the independence of Ghana meant nothing unless the rest of Africa so that when in 1958 the French President Charles de Gaulle asked those who are colonized to vote yes or no, yes to remain independent but under French control, Ahmed Sékou Touré said, We prefer to live in dignity and poverty rather than to live in comfort and in slavery. And Guinea regained our independence in 1958. I can still remember the man for whom I am named, Patrice Emery Lumumba, writing from Thisville prison to his wife Josephine Opango and saying, I know I will die, but Africa shall be governed by Africa and her story will be told by Africa. And I can still hear that. I can still hear Julius Kambarage Nyerere in 1962 telling Jomo Kenyatta, Apollo Milton Obote, and Edward Mutesa, I'm prepared to delay the independence of Tanganyika that we may regain independence as one country, but they listen not. I can still hear David Dako of Central African Republic, then known as Ubangishari, saying that unity is important because it is the only thing that is going to immunize us against the vagaries of the neo-colonial project. I can still hear Algeria's Ahmed Ben Bella and many others, Gamal Abdel Nasser. And I can see the 32 leaders assembled in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, between the 23rd to the 25th days of May 1963, each one of them inspired. Can still remember the speech of Haile Selassie, that of Nyerere, that of David Dako, but the most iconic of them, that of the Osagyefo, Kwame Nkrumah, delivered on Saturday, the 25th day of May 1963, telling his audience, we must unite now. Let us live here with one government, with one army, with one currency, with one capital. And I propose, he said on that day, that the capital of Africa should be Leopoldville, now Kinshasa. But others can choose another. I can hear him. But we listened to him not. And we ended up with the Organization of African Unity, a week jamboree where African leaders attend and deliver speeches which are only mouth deep and heart absent. So that today, as we are gathered here, look at our continent. As we talk about new governance, what is it that we must do? Because we are here not to lament, we are here to prescribe solutions. John Henry Clark said that when African countries regained their independence, each one of them adopted a system of governance that was inherited from the colonizer. And I tell you, none of them will succeed on the basis of those systems. And if you doubted John Henry Clark, look at our mother continent. Look at her. Since we gained the thing that we call independence, look at what they did to Sylvanus Olympia in 1963. Togo has never been the same again. Look at what they did to Lumumba in 1961. The Democratic Republic of Congo has never been the same again. Look at what they did to Ahmed Ben Bella in Algeria. It has never been the same again. Look at what they did to Ahmed Sékou Touré in Guinea. Guinea has never been the same again. Look at what they did to Amilcar Cabral in Guinea-Bissau and Cabo Verde. It has never been the same again. Look at what they did in Sudan. It is at war. Look at what they did to John Garang di Mabior in South Sudan. never the same again. Look at Somalia, never the same again. Look at northern Mozambique, not the same again. Look at the Sahel, what they did to Thomas Isidore Noel Sankara, not the same again. That is the continent. That is why we are gathered here to ask ourselves the fundamental question. What systems of governance can we adopt in order to realize our potential? In 1965, the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah wrote a book in which it is actually claimed, and for which he was removed from power. The book was Neocolonialism, the last stage of imperialism. And he says in the book, it is the most dangerous because the colonialist is at his most desperate. He is desperate now. He is desperate and wants to destroy us. But what are we doing, we in the mother continent? You know, the white man was diabolically clever. Chinua Achebe writes in his book, Things Fall Apart, in 1958, he came, told us that our gods were bad. He told us that our governance systems were bad. He told us that our names were bad. He told us that our customs are bad, that our languages were bad, and our governance systems were bad. And we believed him. And because we believed him, we find ourselves in the space where we are. We inherited things that we cannot understand. So constantly on a daily basis, we are in a space where we climb trees to look for fish. We will never find fish in the trees. We must rethink how we are doing things. I never use the word democracy unless when I want to explain it away. Because what is democracy? Who defined it? The Greeks. It was good for them. The Americans redefined it. Abraham Lincoln saying it is a government of the people, for the people, and by the people. He defined it for themselves. When the Americans in Declaration of Independence are saying, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are born equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain alienable rights, that among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Slavery is alive and well. The civil rights movement is in 1960 when I'm alive. Which men were they talking about? Which democracy were they talking about? I talk about good governance. Because something must have been good amongst the Yoruba. That is why the Oni of Ife still makes sense. Something must have been good about the Emir of Kano. That is why it still makes sense. Something must have been good about the leader of Ijebu land. That is why it still makes sense. Isn't there something that we can get from there and create our own? This Coca-Cola-ized democracy from Europe and America, why must we continue to have it? This is the question. Your own kinsman, Adekeye Adebajo, writes a book which I commend to you, in which he says, The Curse of Berlin, Africa after the Cold War. We are still wedded to boundaries. My kinsman and friend and the former Prime Minister of Kenya said he needs a visa, single entry visa, to come to Nigeria. Why? 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 because of Berlin. I come here, my miserable Kenya shilling must compete against the Naira, and you don't even accept it. You want the almighty dollar. Why? Why? It is governance, and we can do something about it. A lot has been written about it. My good friend, who is a professor of political science and himself a traditional ruler in Ghana, Nana Kobina Nketia V, has written a book about culture and governance in Africa. These are the questions that we ought to be asking ourselves. What is it that the Baganda do? What is it that the Zulu do? What is it that the Bunyoro Kitara do? What is it that the Akan do? What is it that the Mosi do? What is it that the Malinke do? What is it that the Zulu do? What is it that the Swati do? What is it that the Herero do? What is it that the Ovambo do? What is it that the Ovimbunu do? What is it that the Shona do? What is it that the Ndebele do? What is it that the Luo do? What is it that the Koyo do that cannot be fused into something, and we distill something that is uniquely African, rich in diversity? What is it that the Japanese are doing? What is it that the Koreans are doing? What is it that the Thais are doing? What is it that the Vietnamese are doing? What is it that the Arabs are doing that we cannot do? Are we children of a lesser God? Us. Through education. Samora Moises Machel at one time said that one day he listened to some Africans arguing, and they were saying, we are better off because we were colonized by the British. And another said we were better off because we were colonized by the French or in Europe. And Samora said, it is like slaves sitting down and saying that one slave master is better than the other. And he said, what does it matter when the slave... And I'm suggesting to us that the time is now for us to rethink how we govern ourselves. And it can be done, and it must be done. Because if it is not done, we are done. You know, many ideas have been floated in Africa. And I am of the view that something is happening. You know, when I see young men across the conference and across the continent of Africa saluting the extraordinary political change, you can see I was not using the word coup d'etat. The extraordinary political change in Burkina Faso, the extraordinary political change in Niger, the extraordinary political change in Mali, in Gabon, and the Malabo Protocol says that unconstitutional changes of government are not desirable. Whose constitution? Made under what tradition? People are tired. They are tired because we know that the ballot does not deliver. The ballot does not create democracy. It creates kakistocracies. Governments by our very worst. That is why out of 54 African countries, 40 of them, every election cycle, they print ballots outside of the continent of Africa. We don't trust each other. In the Democratic Republic of Congo now, there are 910 political parties. We have bastardized this thing that we inherited from Europe and America. We must rethink. Our countryman, the late Ali Mazrui, once said, in trying to answer this question of governance, he wrote a paper in the year 2001. If African politics is ethnic prone, can we have constitutions that are ethnic proof? And I dare say that we have failed. We have failed in many countries. The constitutions are not worth the paper that they are written on. We honor them in breach. The question is, what then must we do? And this is why I think that the young people present in this assembly are part of the solution. Part of the solution because the youth have a critical role to play, but you must never ignore the old. Because the old have some experience. They have some wisdom if they were wise in the beginning. Age on, and I want to be clear, age in and of itself does not make one intelligent. If you are a fool as a young person and you grow old, you are just an old fool. So I'm suggesting to us that we must respect age. The Oromo Gada system. Have you heard about the Oromo Gada system? When you acquire a certain age, you go to a certain level. In other words, the society takes advantage of the entire population. They take advantage of the youthful zest of the young ones. They take advantage of the measured experience of the old ones. And lo and behold, the society is complete. It can be done and it must be done. You know now, when I talk to professors at the universities across Africa, and they tell me that they are professors of political science, I ask them, what are you teaching in political science? Are you still teaching John Stuart Mill? Are you still teaching Sophocles and Aristophanes and Socrates and Plato? Are you still teaching Julius Caesar and Aurelius? Or you are teaching contemporary African politics? Are you teaching the Osagie for Kwame Nkrumah? Are you teaching the philosophy, whether you like him or not, of Nnamdi Azikiwe? Are you teaching the ideas of Mashuda Abiola? Are you teaching Julius Kambarage Nyerere and Ujamaa? Are you teaching Kaunda and humanism? Are you teaching Andy Mbahaman Yatoivo in Namibia? Are you teaching Robert Subukwe? Are you teaching Winnie Madikizela Mandela? Are you teaching? Who are you teaching? Because we must begin to teach the ideas of our people and interrogate them, because nobody is perfect. All of us have sinned and fallen short of the expectation of the continent of Africa, but the time is now. And I hope and pray that what we see in the Sahel will be the beginning of something. You know, when the Americans became independent, there were only 13 original states. It can start with 4. And then the others will join. And then they will join. And in 100 years, we will have a united Africa. The speaker before me talked about the many protocols that African Union makes. Oh, we met in Maputo and said how our women are going to be mainstreamed. Have we mainstreamed? We sat in Malabo and said that we are going to ensure good governance. Have we made it? We sat in Yamoussoukro in 1988 and said we were going to free their space. We sat in Kampala in the year 2012 and said we are going to eliminate internally displaced persons. We sat in Kigali in the year 2018 and said that we are going to have a single African passport. We sat in Addis Ababa in the year 2013 and said we have Agenda 2063. We sat and said that we are going to have Africa Continental Free Trade Area. We sat here in Abuja in the year 2001 and said that we are going to have 15% of our budget in the medical field. Have we done all those? Africa is a forest of protocols and a sea of conventions which nobody ever swims in, and the forests, the trees are never cut. I'm suggesting to us that the time is now. The time is now for us to ensure that we change. Because I must not belabor the issue. I must not belabor the issue because we need action. The beauty of the moment is that something is happening. Something is beginning to happen. People are moving. And people are saying that it must be done. I have people in this assembly with whom we have moved across the continent. Lina Sokorie is now establishing a university here in Abuja to talk about governance in Africa. The president of Nigeria, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, has just set up a school of governance in Abeokuta. Things are happening. My good friend Arikana Chihombori Kwao, in 2018, we were 200 of us in Ghana talking about African unity. In 218, we were with President Chakwera in Malawi. On the 29th day, we are in Somaliland in Hargeisa. In October, we are in Ouagadougou. And then we are in Liberia. We are moving. People are moving across the continent. And the reason why that is happening is because we now know what is Nigeria without Africa. Nigeria, Lord Lugard, in the year 1914, put North and South together. It can't be made without Lord Lugard's agenda. It can't be done. I want Nigeria to be the leader. 1 out of every 5 black people in the world are Nigerians. If you go to any place and you don't find a Nigeria, run away. Because that place is not worth habiting. You find them in all fields. Nigeria, provide the leadership. Nigeria, give us a governance system. Whether it's a federation or a confederation, give us a governance system. Nigeria, don't define yourselves as Igbo or Yoruba or Kanuri or Hausa or Fulani. Don't. When you give us, when Nigeria does that, Benin will follow, Togo will follow, Chad will follow, Burkina Faso will follow, all countries will follow, and once we have captured the West, the Spirit will move to the center. The Spirit will move to the east. The Spirit will move to the south. The Spirit will move to the north, and those in the north who question the Africanness, the ghost of questioning will be exercised, and they will agree. which reconvenes next year in Nairobi. No. It must be the beginning of something. I know the colonizer did something to us, took away our language. He colonized our minds. I agree with Ngugi wa Thiong'o. We must decolonize our minds. He drew boundaries. We must dissolve those boundaries. He created offices and election circles. In many African countries, our preoccupation is political office and elections. You don't hear the Arabs talk about that. The Chinese don't talk about that. We must stop thinking in 5 4-year election terms. Let us think 100 years from hence. That is the only way in which we'll create jobs for the continent of Africa. You know, the gods talk in very strange ways. When we were here a little earlier in the presence of the Deputy Speaker, the lights disappeared. It was a statement to authority here and in Africa that we have problems to solve. The energy problem that the Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga talked about. We have disease to deal with. We have unemployment to deal with. We have technology to deal with. We are not going to deal with them in silos of little countries. We cannot have over 33 currencies in Africa. We cannot have 54 passports. It cannot be that it takes 24 hours to travel from Lagos in Nigeria to Windhoek in Namibia. It cannot be, and it must not be. So today, I am concluding by saying, African unity must be there. But it is not the unity of the graveyard where people agree in silence. It is the unity where ideas are cross-fertilized and cross-pollinated by ideas, and bad ideas give way to good ideas. It will be united when people begin not to have too much faith in the offices that they hold, but they have faith in serving the people. I do not know how many of you here have heard of this great African with whom I want to end my speech, James Emmons Kwegyiragre. James Emmons Kwegyiragre was a Ghanaian. He was the teacher of the Osagie for Kwame Nkrumah. But before I come to him, permit me to mention yet another African who is important. This African is a South African called Pixley Kaisa Kaseme, often referred to as the founder of the African National Congress. In April the year 1906, in the University of Columbia in the United States of America, he delivered an iconic speech called The Regeneration of Africa. Africa must regenerate. He was only 27 years of age, the age of those who are here. You are the ones who are going to change Africa. Don't shy away. Seize the opportunity. In the dinner table of change, there are no invitation letters written, répondez s'il vous plaît. You break the door and find yourselves in the room and take charge. This is the time. James Emmons Kwegyiragre said that when the white man came, he did this. And he said, comparing it to a poultry farmer, he said that in his village, there was a poultry farmer. That poultry farmer, as all poultry farmers do, kept chicken. One day, the young one of an eagle also strayed. And the eagle and the chicken were fed by the farmer for several years. But another day, a naturalist came and saw the eagle and said, "But this is not chicken." And the chicken farmer said, "Yes, it used to be an eagle, but we have fed it on chicken feed for so long, it lost its chickenhood, it lost its eaglehood, is now chicken." But the naturalist said, "No, once you are an eagle, no matter how long you've been fed on chicken feed, you'll always be an eagle." He came one day and held the eagle on the palm of his hand and urged it to leave. It refused to leave. And the chicken farmer said, "I told you, it was once an eagle. We have fed it on chicken feed for too long, but it is now chicken. We have been fed on the chicken feed of IMF, chicken feed of the World Bank, chicken feed of USAID, chicken feed of GIZ, chicken feed of USAID, chicken feed of CEDA Sweden, chicken feed of CEDA Canada." But the following day he came when the sun was rising, and he placed on his palm, and the eagle flew away. And he said, "I told you, no matter how long you feed an eagle on chicken feed, when the time comes, it will assume its eaglehood and it will fly. You are the eagles, and I'm urging you to fly. God bless you."
That will be joining me. And our topic of discussion will be developing democracy, charting Africa's pathway from neoliberalism and exploration. And as I introduce my panelists, I'm sure you're going to really like this one. It's absolutely a high-level panel discussion. Help me welcome Her Excellency, Dr. Arikana Chihombo-Rikwayo, former African Union Ambassador to the United States. I've been waiting actually the whole morning to hear her speak. You know, she's one very inspirational woman, African woman. Please give her a big round of applause. These are the people that are encouraging us to make a difference in Africa, and we have to honor them. Thank you so much. In that same spirit, help me to welcome, I know, a man who really inspired you. You were so inspired and motivated after he spoke. Even I wrote, I don't know, I think about 3 pages of some points that he was talking about. Professor Patrick Lumumba, a lawyer and advocate, former director of Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission. You're welcome. So these are my 2 amazing panelists. And also, as I walk, please welcome Yvonne Katsande. Thank you. Thank you. Firstly, I am so honored to be sitting here and speaking to you. I think, in fact, let me say that the work that you have done is absolutely amazing. And I feel that if people really listen to the work that you've done over the years, which so many people cannot even do, and we really enact it, we will be somewhere. So thank you so much for being the leaders that you are for us as the young Africans, aspiring Africans, business Africans, and the African community at large. Now, I've heard, you know, the discussions on obviously developing Africa. A lot of questions come to mind. But can I start off by saying that we need to extricate ourselves as Africa from detrimental treaties. There's a whole lot of things that were spoken of. The IMF, it's all the culprits that you all know. Can I start off by asking, and this is a question that I'll pose to the both of you, what can Africa do to come out of the United Nations? I honestly feel that that organization is one of the organizations that have absolutely oppressed Africa at large. Over and above the ones that fund Africa, the ones that have actually, you know, dominated the curricula. What can we do as Africa to actually come out of the United Nations? Let me start with you, ma'am.
Well, let me start by thanking my brother, Professor Lumumba. For the wonderful presentation this morning. Truly appreciate it. Also want to thank
Sorry, can I just ask, we have music playing. Is it maybe the sound that needs to be fixed?
Thank you. Also wanted to thank Prime Minister, former Prime Minister of Kenya, for his words of wisdom. To get back to your question, do we need to be members of the United Nations? Do African nations need to be members of the United Nations? The answer is a resounding H to the no. Why is that? You must understand why United Nations was created. You must understand why IMF, World Bank, the Bretton Woods institutions were created. You must understand why the World Trade Organization was created. The United Nations, the Bretton Woods institutions, the WTO, they were institutions, among others, that were created after the European tribal wars that they call World War II. Europe, as usual, had destroyed itself, and they needed to rebuild, and they could not afford to rebuild themselves. So it is, in 3 weeks, a few countries came together and created what we now know as World Bank and IMF, as a way of figuring out how to steal from developing nations, majority being Africans, in order to fund Europe. In 1 month, a few nations came together, again organized, for the purposes of rebuilding Europe from its self-destruction and implosion. So it is in 4 weeks, a few nations came up with what we know as the United Nations. That was in 1945. These institutions were never created for the benefit of the greater world. And yet, today, like fools, nations have been invited to become members of the United Nations. For what reason? African nations, an entity that was created to rebuild Europe, are asked to become members, and we are happy to be members of the United Nations. When you look at what African nations are doing when they go to the United Nations year in and year out, African nations are receiving brown envelopes, in some cases just being forced to vote on issues pertaining to other nations, but never African nations. So to answer your question very bluntly and honestly, African nations need to pull out of the United Nations. Yeah. There is nothing there for us. We are there just to be used. We are there for them to say, when they go to the world stage, where Africans present, check. Beyond a check mark, there's nothing else for us. I would hope that one day African leaders can take a position. If you look at when they were wanting us to be represented at the UN Security Council, we want you Africans to come and be part of the UN Security Council. But like a little boy, come into the room, and by the way, there's a small boy chair for you there. Sit there and be quiet.
You go back again the next year, you go back again, and I'm asking myself, is it because you don't see that that's a small boy chair? And then what about the advisors of the so-called leaders that go there? What are they advising? It's really not rocket science, if the truth be told. So you begin to ask, is there maybe perhaps a document of some sort that the members have signed that doesn't allow them to easily move out of the United Nations?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Maybe we could try the other one? Yes.
Thank you very much. Let me start by agreeing with my sister that this institution, when it was created in 1945, all African countries, excluding Liberia and Ethiopia, were still under colonial rule. So it was created without us. The architecture is against us. That is why you have the permanent members, and the vote of any of those members can veto all other votes. And there is no provision in any of the documents of the UN, whether the Charter or the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that says we cannot leave. The reason why we don't leave is because we are disunited. Because we want to be good little boys. And it's not only the UN that they have created to divide us. The Commonwealth,
Yes.
La Francophonie, the community of Portuguese-speaking countries. The day we organize ourselves under the aegis of the African Union and we speak with a single voice, that is the day we'll recognize that we don't need some of these bodies which gain their legitimacy by having Africans playing what in English is called the gooseberry. You just sit there for it to be said that you are there. So I can't agree more that the time is now for Africa to rethink her membership in many of these organizations. But that requires unity, coherent, common policy on international relations, and the day we define ourselves, then we'll discover that the world will come for us, however you define the world.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So would you say that, in fact, how did Cold War politics actually influence the evolution of democracy in Africa?
Like our conversations earlier, what is democracy in Africa? When you look at the Cold War, I liken that situation to the environment that we are in today, where we are seeing President Trump ushering in a new era in diplomacy, ushering in a new era in politics, ushering in a new era in trade. There are many changes taking place around the world. And when you look at those changes, we must look at them with the perspective of what's in it for us. They often say, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Let's not jump on the bandwagon and follow the trends that some people might say, oh, he's doing this, we don't like it. The one I like the most is when he pulled out USAID.
Yeah.
Do you guys understand how big that is? That's a juggernaut of a relief that has just been brought to Africa. Do you guys realize that?
Did many people actually understand?
Yes.
I think that was the question there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do people understand what that seemingly benign entity was doing? That entity was not about aid to Africa. That entity was not about poor people. That entity was not about development. Like I said in one of my interviews, that entity in Africa and everywhere they have been, they were a wolf in sheep's clothing. When you see that clinic being built, when you see that school being built, when you see those social programs, take an inventory.
Yeah.
It is never where there is nothing of value. Those entities are being built in areas that are rich in minerals. So while they are running their clinic, guess what they're really doing? They're keeping an eye on that uranium in that area. Who is digging? Why are they digging? Where are they taking their diggings? It is never about the people. It is never about developing anything. It is never about building anything. If it was truly about poor people, guess what? They're having issues with homelessness in California. They're having issues with homelessness in New York City. I know communities all over the South and in the mountain parts of the United States where people still don't have electricity and running water. Hello? So if it's about poor people, we say to USAID, look in your backyard. There are plenty of them there. So let's analyze the environment we live in. Whether it is the environment post-Cold War, the environment post-European tribal wars, the environment we are in now with the geopolitics and President Trump pushing his America First agenda. I use an example of what President Trump is doing with the America First agenda. The side effects, the byproducts, though not intended for Africa, are good for Africa. And the biggest gift he gave us is by dissolving USAID. USAID is how the CIA ran some of its operations. USAID is who funded some of the people who are going against the government, people who are within the government, who are on payrolls of foreign nations, people who are undermining our progress are being funded through agencies like USAID. Your own media that is supposed to boom good news about your country are being paid through USAID to spew negative images of your country. I can go on and on and on. Nations have been destroyed through USAID as simple wolf in sheep clothing. So let's be realistic. Let's understand our NGOs. Let's understand the environment we live in. Let's not be spoon-fed as to what's good for us. Let's use our brains. I am here to say, understand the geopolitics. Let's cherry pick what is good for us and run with it and not be allowed to believe in that which they want us to believe.
That's it. You know, just to add on to what she's saying about USAID, back in 2020, I'll take you back in 2020 when the COVID-19 pandemic, so-called pandemic, actually hit the whole world. USAID played a very vital role. I'm sure you would know that, right? Distributing vaccines. Are you aware, especially if you listen to what she's saying, that USAID was there for a purpose, to monitor? I'll give you an example of the DR Congo. There is an ending war only on a certain part of DR Congo. Do you know why? Because they have minerals and rare earths there. They can never settle that war because these so-called USAID NGOs are helping the war-torn area which they have caused. And then we have diseases that are unending. There's this disease in Congo. Ebola. Did you know that they had a cure for Ebola virus? I was shocked. Ebola virus never had a cure for years until one of their very own, God works in mysterious ways, right? One of their very own white person caught Ebola, traveled back to America, and because they were so scared, they cured him on the spot. So I said, oh, what about the ones in Congo? Don't they need the cure also? So it shows you that it's all a lie. Over 300 media houses sponsored by USAID. So bad. Now, Professor Lumumba.
Let me just make a comment on that Ebola issue.
Yes.
When I was still in Washington, there was a meeting of all NGOs around the world to come and see if Ebola could be declared an international emergency. This is after the first big outbreak. Why did these people want Ebola declared an international emergency? because that's how the monies will be loosened around the world.
Yes.
Ebola wasn't that big of a problem. Now,
Just like COVID.
Now, I'm just like COVID. Yeah. Now, this is just me and a few others talking, so don't take it as gospel. But we feel that somewhere intentionally infecting people in that region so they can increase the count to justify that the numbers are increasing. They wanted Ebola declared an international emergency in DRC when it wasn't. And guess what? They got what they wanted. Guess what followed? A lot of NGOs, they left Africa, caught. Oh yeah, let's all run to DRC. That's where the money is, because Ebola was declared an international emergency. It's a money-making business for them, using Africans. So we need to be acutely aware of these wolves that are coming to Africa. We do not need any of them. Let them get out of Africa. Let us sink and swim.
Absolutely.
This is our Africa, our way.
That's it. Now, Professor Lumumba, you know, there's so many ways that democracy has either been a lie or it came in a different phase, but obviously we all know what exactly the purpose of it was. Talk about climate change. That's also another way of taking away people's sovereignty away. We're talking about health right now. That's also another way of taking people's sovereignty. When we had COVID, we had nations being asked to sign documents to say that no matter what happens, you'll give us your mines, you'll give us your, your sovereign property. And I thought to myself, I thought you said it was a virus. A virus is in the air. So there's so many ways that African freedoms are being taken away from the people. And one of those major ones also is just the economy. We now live in a multipolar world. There are options, I believe. It's no longer unipolar where we had America just demanding and telling us what to do. But we've also got the BRICS nations that have come up where they are offering something different. You can actually choose. Can Africa find its feet within the multipolar world? And if so, how can Africa also gain its economic sovereignty without actually falling into authoritarianism?
If Africa does not define her agenda will be defined for her. Look at what is happening now. The government of the United States of America is exporting unwanted criminals to the continent of Africa. And we are receiving them gleefully. I saw some go to Eswatini.
Yes.
Some will be exported. The criminals are not good for America, but they are good for Eswatini. And we accept it. Africa will continue to be in this space as long as she is divided into little countries. Benin, Eswatini, Lesotho, Cabo Verde, Comoros. We must speak with one voice. One would have thought that one of the ways in which Africa would do this was initially through the regional economic communities. 14 ECOWAS countries, 14 SADC countries, 8 East African Community. We thought that that would then lead to the African Union, so that when you want to talk to Africa, you talk to Africa in Addis Ababa. And the good doctor said it. Can you imagine that little Qatar calls all African leaders and they go by private jet? And they go to Qatar in Doha, which is smaller than Lagos. The whole of Qatar is smaller than Lagos.
To sign a peace deal.
To even beyond that, to listen as to how they can have investment in the continent of Africa. But I always say that international relations is the law of the jungle. We must hunt in packs. Wolves hunt in packs. So it is our duty as the continent of Africa to define what we want. If we met in Addis Ababa, the 54 plus countries, and said, from this day henceforth, if you want to deal with us from an economic standpoint, speak to us in Addis Ababa. If you want to know our foreign policy, speak to us. If you want military collaboration, speak to us. If you want all this, speak to us.
Professor, can I come in
please?
There? You spoke about the AU earlier on, and I really understood what you were talking about, because I also attend the African Union Summit every year. 3 different years I was there. They had very interesting topics. One of them being decolonizing the curricula.
Yes.
The other, an education fit for an African. I think it was something like that. In all the occasions that I have gone to the African Union, you're saying that if you want to speak to Africa, come to Addis Ababa. Here's what I found very interesting. We are having an African Union summit, but we have the IMF there saying that we want to sponsor your think tank. I found it very disturbing. So I asked a question. I said, which organization are you from? The IMF. What are you even doing at the African Union in the first place? And then you are here, you're saying you want to sponsor a think tank, not in one country, on the African continent. What nonsense is that? Because we don't have heads to form a think tank. Another thing that was also interesting was that they say that we want to improve the curricula. Listen to this. The theme for that year was decolonizing the curricula and an education fit for an African. We had an American institute that said that they wanted to improve the African curriculum. I thought that was amazing.
Let me tell you, my sister, and I'll give you this analogy.
So in actual fact, let me just answer. Yeah. My question then becomes, the African leaders themselves, do they even understand really what they are doing? I think I would love to have had even the House Speaker. There was a gentleman who asked a question, how old was the other leader when he should have been here to answer that question?
Let me also add to that. When we went to I remember one summit, this was in Niger. When we were registering, I just get naughty sometimes. I just go into places I'm not expected to go. But I noticed the room we were registering, they were mostly white people. And I said, wait a minute. Here we are, they're also using facial recognition registration. So I said, I need to find out who these white people are. So I just was acting foolish and cracking jokes. And I sat next to one white man. So what are you doing? And the man had a personal cell phone. He's taking pictures of everybody who's getting their IDs. It turned out this was a French company that was hired to register Africa's best, Africa's leaders, let me say.
And collect the data.
And they're collecting the data, including facial recognition. Wow. At the African Union Summit. Why? Couldn't we found an African company that could do this? But all our data, and oh, by the way, who owns that company? The wife of one of the former presidents of France. I rest my case.
Okay, Professor, let me
let me, as I answer that question, let me say how happy I am that in this conference I don't have a banner of Western organizations that have sponsored this conference.
And I think that deserves a big round of applause.
And I say that because this is how it begins. It begins this way. And when we make the decision, and allow me this analogy, which I've used elsewhere, that if the sheep knew that is the shepherd who will be eating them one by one, they would rebel against the shepherd, not the wolves. So that when he is chasing the wolves away, it is not for your benefit, it's for fattening you for another day. Until the day that we know that all these organizations fatten Africa for their benefit. My good friend, Dr. Arikana, served, albeit in the United States, as an ambassador of the AU. That organization is almost 70% funded, 90% funded by other organizations. And if our English is still correct, he or she who pays the piper calls the tunes. So, but is it not possible if we were to be persuaded? If African governments were to say all African governments charge something called VAT, suppose we were to say that if it is 16% VAT, 2% will go to 1% to regional organization, 1% to the African Union. We would fund African Union. Then we would begin to prioritize what we do. What you see in Addis Ababa every year is an annual jamboree where people meet to read speeches which have been written for them. And then they wait for another. Take, for example, the year 2020 was the year of silencing of the guns. The guns are loud.
Yes.
We are in the month of July, 4 months away. This year will have ended. This is the year of the African Union for reparations. How many of you have heard about that theme?
No,
very few.
Have not come to Africa.
So the truth is that we must rethink. And I want to conclude with this. What Europe and America and others do is also to recruit some from within our ranks, to torpedo the good that we are doing. The fifth columnists. So we must be aware. Who do we initiate? We must make a solemn decision that we have African meetings where there is nobody but Africans. It is not going to be easy. Let's remind ourselves. It is going to be 5 steps forward, 2 backwards, but we are moving. It is intergenerational. Once you recognize that, then you'll not be worried. My good friend, Dr. Obi there, told us she's been in this space. We've been in this space. The good doctor there have been in this space. Yours is to take over the baton and run your leg. Your children and children's children, it is an intergenerational war and fight. Yeah. But it must be fought and it must be won. And I conclude by saying, when I see us, how did we get to know each other? How did I get to know all this? We are discovering ourselves. So the journey is on. But there are potholes along the way. But we must move on. Yes. And move on, we will.
Okay, you want to add on? All right.
I need to share a personal experience to emphasize the point he just made. I was at an African Union Peace and Security meeting where we are supposed to be discussing peace and security issues on the continent. So when I walked into the room, I thought to myself, wait a minute, we're talking about peace and security in Africa. What are these people doing here? And so I waited for a chance to sneak in. So I raised my question, and I wanted to know if we're discussing issues to do with peace and security in Africa. I turned around and I looked at all of them and I said, why are they here? Are we invited to European peace and security meetings?
Absolutely not.
The sister who was moderating the session got so mad at me, she called for a break. And during the break, she had the audacity to come to me and accuse me of messing up her session. There. Lies our problem. And the sister happened to be working for the United Nations as a country representative in Kenya. Thank you.
The fact that we are waking up to this is also important. Now, I'm just going to do one last round of questions to my panelists. But practically, I know we could discuss at length what needs to happen, you know, as Africans, what can we do? I think a call to action for us to actually practicalize what is going on right now. Can I ask this? The leaders that we have within the African continent, I heard one of the speakers saying that we have leaders that don't want to even cede power. They have been there for years as though we don't have other young people that we can trade. Would you say that these leaders are a problem? And if so, how are we going to deal with it? Because it comes to the question of how have the so-called democratic elections actually have affected the democracy of Africa at large? That's question one. And then question two, either of you can answer any of it, is that as we have discussed this and we have spoken about it, do we need at all to have a legal binding constitution of some sort, or can we re-amend existing constitutions legally to help Africa move forward? Or can we just ignore that and start afresh? This in reference to what is happening in the Sahel region. The president, I don't know whether I should call him president, of Burkina Faso was asked to come to Washington. He said he was too busy serving the people of Burkina Faso, that being in Washington meant nothing. In just 2 years of also being called a junta government, which I questioned the other time, I said, who came up with the phrase junta government in the first place? How is it junta when the people of Niger are rejoicing? The people of Burkina Faso, they actually want to work with their president. 2 years of this so-called Sahel region trio, what they have done is what you have been talking about for years. They did it in 2 years. Infrastructure, factories, jobs. I learned just recently that they were on school holidays in Burkina Faso. The young people didn't want to go on holiday. They went to paint and clean streets in support of their leader. So that's why I was saying that. Does it take rocket science for us to change it? You said something very profound, Professor, that the African Union has literally become a talk shop. Sometimes it's very annoying. Honestly, I attend all the time. I'm asking the same questions every year. There are no answers. And these are policymakers of an African Union. Now, we need to practicalize this. Which way forward from here? How do we deal with these so-called leaders and electoral systems? I'm not saying that everybody then should become a so-called coup government. Absolutely not. But I'm saying, how do we serve the people in practicality? Thank you.
Let me start with let me repeat, and I'll say this, and I'll say it repeatedly. That is a toothless bulldog. And until this dog is given teeth, it will continue to be a toothless bulldog. Some of you may not realize, African Union doesn't have sovereignty. Membership in the African Union is optional. Any leader can walk out at any time, no consequences. African Union chair, current African Union president, they can't tell any country to do anything. So if the African leaders are truly serious to this toothless bulldog, they must give it teeth. They must give African Union some sort of sovereignty of some sort to where they can actually mandate that certain things be done within the continent.
They need to take out Antonio Guterres and stop him from attending those meetings. It could be a starting point.
In fact, none of them need to attend the African Union Summit. This is about Africans discussing African issues, our continental agenda, coming up with a true common African position that can be implemented with a pathway. But to talk about common African position that cannot be implemented. Even the AFCFTA, try building a highway connecting the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean. Do you know what blocks that railway will go through as it goes? Because we are not together. Prime Minister spoke about the railway network. When you see it, it's beautiful. The things that can be done with these railway lines. But what we end up doing is, We go to sleep and we dream about those railway lines. And it ends there. Empowering the African Union and give it teeth is what the leaders should do if they mean business. But they don't.
Okay, ma'am.
So let's agree on that.
I'm going to have to ask Professor Lumumba to round off as well.
Thank you very much. I agree with you completely. One of the things that is being done from a very practical standpoint, I know there is now a movement which is operating under the African People's Union. And what it wants to do is to bring pressure to bear on Pan-African institutions to begin to take positive action. It is not going to be easy. There is going to be pushback. In the intervening period is to identify what I call coalitions of the willing and start with those coalitions of the willing with a view to planting the seed and watering that seed. It is not going to be easy. I know several years ago I talked to one head of state in East Africa, and after that conversation there is something that was called the fast tracking of East African Federation. Yes. It also was dead on arrival. So we'll do 10 things and we'll succeed on the 10th one. So don't be tired. Don't be tired of asking these questions. I was telling my wife just a few minutes ago that I write to letters, I write to president, and some people ask me, don't you get tired? And I said, I consider myself to be like Paul in the Bible. Did you see the reply of the Galatians to Paul?
Yes.
There isn't. So I keep on writing because that is the role that I play. And when you look at it from that point, you never tire. Of course, as my good friend Madame Obi said, sometimes you feel that it is not worth it. That is when you re-energize yourself. That is when I send Arikana a message. That is when she sends me a message. That is when I send Okorie a message and others within the room. It can be done.
Thank you. Maybe just one question. Yes. Yes, let's hear the solution. Solutions is what we're looking for, right?
Well, since we have this juggernaut, useless, toothless bulldog that is called the African Union, guess what, guys? We have the Sahel nations. Why can't we start that which we desire to see? A single currency, a single military, a network of railways. Let's take all those things that are in the African Union agenda that cannot be implemented because they are documents sitting in a drawer. Let's implement them in the Sahel nation. We start with 3 African nations. Before you know it, we have a United States of Africa.
Yay, wonderful. One question, I think. Am I allowed 1 or 2 questions? 2 questions. So we do male and female, right? Okay, please can we have the roving mic go around? We've got hands here, we've got hands here. Wow, this is very interesting. We've got a lady here, we've got another lady here. So can we maybe start with this one? In the front row. Sorry, sir. In the front row, yeah, you can go. And then we have, wow, we have this gentleman here in the hat.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. I am so delighted to be in this hall today. And I will be doing myself a disservice to live here without speaking. I want to first of all appreciate this hall. All my life I have worked in the civil society space. I came from Plateau State, where my son, Ambassador Chris, resides. And we have never, ever had a meeting in a room without the white color. And today is the first day. Please, can we give ourselves a round of applause? That is to show that the voices of people like Professor Lumumba, whom I appreciate daily in my life, and I have the privilege of meeting him today, is not in vain. It means that we have a pool of African young people whom we have worked with and told that the time is now for you to occupy the space. You are ready to do that. Not minding the EndSARS saga that wanted to stop you. I want on that note to say that we are really talking and talking. I was in African Union building and I was very glad. And I say, oh, this is the first time that my continent is doing a great thing by building a magnificent building for Africa. And somebody said, Justina, stop.
Built by the Chinese.
This building was not given by Africans. It was donated to us by Chinese. Yeah. That means what Her Royal Highness and the Prof has said. I saw myself that we don't have secrets. They instituted every cable in that building. Yes. It means that every discussions that goes on, despite the fact that the half of the houses, the half of the building are whites. Every of our communications, there are gadgets there that gets back to every part of the world. Who has done this to us? Who has bewitched Africa? How do we move from this step to another step? How do we reclaim our continent? I was in Niger. I'm doing a project in Niger since after the coup d'etat, just to make sure, just like my mentor, Mrs. Enobi, said, our women all over the world, wherever we go, women are represented. And we wanted to make sure that women are fine. And at the airport, I was arrested. And I was very happy. I told them that this is why I'm here. Because I am the womb of Africa. And as a womb of Africa, I will stand my feet to make sure that I raise my voice. That at the end of the day, no matter what our leaders have done, if our leaders, because they were telling me that our leaders in Nigeria did not support them. And I said, I am not here to represent the voices of the leaders. I am here to represent the voices of the womb of Africa.
Ma'am, can we
and
just
because
give you
of that,
10 more seconds?
Africa must stand firm.
10 more
What
seconds.
am I trying to arrive at?
Yes.
I am trying to arrive at the point that except we do what Professor Lumumba have said, speaking in one voice, getting united, and I am very happy that the people of Sahel, which is Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, are saying, as far as they are concerned, democracy is about putting food in their table. And I want to say, except all the African leaders will speak with that one voice, we will sit here and start over again. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
You. We have a gentleman there with a question.
Thank you very much. I must be most grateful to the organizer, Ambassador Chris Iyama, for this opportunity, and members of panel. Thank you so much, Prof, for those insights, and Madam, for what you have shared. I get very challenged. Now, first and foremost, I work among the students. I'm a lecturer for students, and I'm inspired to cause a change among students. But we meet some structural challenges and some behavioral challenges. Now, I'm of the opinion, believing in the ideals of character, that if Africa must change and if Africa must go in the hands of young people. Okay, thank you. Apologies, sir. If Africa must be led by young people, there must be some evidence of strong character, you know, because of what we have suffered in the past. And like was rightly opined, some of the people who we, in quotes, accuse of this wrong leadership were once in their youth. And so I'm asking this question because of the changes that we need to make in our democracy and the inclusion of young people particularly. So some of the problems that I've seen are that we have these issues among students, particularly of internet fraud, you know, corruption at the most little levels. And so I'm asking that in the bid to unite and come together to build something new, what are we going to do in terms of policy and some kind of carefulness to be sure that some of the things that ate up the system before in terms of character deficits, you know, because even with us trading with Europe, we still have issues with fraud, trust, etc. So how are we going to have trust now? Let's assume we all buy the idea. We come together. How are we going to have trust? How are we going to build integrity within the systems? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We can answer.
For me, if you look at the issues that we're struggling with, issues that are so common sense and non-issue, For example, just the educational system. I often joke about the Minister of Roads, whose road to his own house is full of potholes. The minister is so used to potholes that he doesn't see anything wrong with that. One phone call and all those potholes to his house could be fixed. Because he just kind of gotten used to it, he no longer sees it as a problem. The ministers of finance who are fully aware of what is being done to us by World Bank and IMF, they go to the World Bank twice a year, and they never challenge World Bank or simply say, we are not coming because of what you're doing to us. I'm saying our inability to address those issues that are so basic. One meeting in Parliament and it's done. Why are we incapable of doing that? It goes down to the mind. We were destroyed where it matters the most. Each and every one of us must look at image in the mirror. Are you colonized? Why do you think the way you do? Do you understand the systems, the processes that were put in place to colonize you, to twist your mind? Something as simple as the color of your skin. I like to say we should refuse to be called black. Because before they came, we were not called black. But they used the color black and white. White representing good, black representing bad. They said the devil is black, the angels are white, and we are white like the angels. Have you ever seen a person who looks like this? It's a lie, but we accepted it. We are not black. But then we believe that automatically anything we do is unacceptable. It was a conditioning process, much like they did to the slaves. They conditioned us to not respect that which we do. A white man can come in and tell the Minister of Education to change the educational system to a Pan-African one. It will be done. Yes. We are waiting for voices that are not like us, but the bottom line is we were defeated where it matters the most. Let's accept that we are colonized and that we have a disease, and that this disease, we are not only sick in a doctor's office, we are not only sick in a hospital ward, we are sick in the intensive care, and we need intensive healing.
Okay, Professor?
Thank you very much. I think let's be very practical. People don't talk about what they are doing because we must ask ourselves, what are we doing? Dr. Rikana has not told you. In her own way, she has an organization which is called ADDI, which is organizing around the continent and around the world. Those are practical things. In 2 weeks' time, I'll be celebrating 30 years since my foundation was founded. We are now present in 47 African countries, including Nigeria. We have never received a single cent from any European donor organization. We said no. Out of our little income, that is what we contribute. And you will be amazed at what young people are doing. Just give you 3 of them who are active in the continent of Africa. One of them from the Gambia now has a cosmetic company with an outlet in Banjul, in Dhaka, and in Lagos. The other one is now one of the leading Kiswahili speakers in Tanzania. And as I speak, he's just been sent by his party to South Africa to empower young people. The other one is a great Ghanaian YouTuber, Wodemaya, who travels around the world. And there was one who have just sent him, Aliu Suleiman from Kaduna. We, in our all small ways, are doing things. Ask yourself, what are you doing? And as I conclude, what are we doing? We are also talking to people who are in positions of leadership. 2 years ago, I talked to the president of Malawi and I told him, I'm bringing 53 Africans as investors. They will not have billions from China. What did he do? We went there. As I speak to you now, one of the people I took there, a young girl who is below 35, is building what will be a multi-billion kwacha company. And as I speak to you now, out of that initiative, in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, will be commissioned one of the largest organic fertilizer companies in Ethiopia. So we just don't talk. In addition to the talk, we are wedding our words with our actions, and we are making a contribution. Ask yourself today, what contribution are you making? Because assume each one of us were to make some contribution, and then we combine our efforts. Who will not listen to us? Who? Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much. Now, as I conclude also, I want to say something. Because, usually when you have discussions like this, people tend to get emotional. Racism is a thing that was planted in us so that we could hate each other. Do you understand? We've only got one race. That is God's race. However, we have very, very dubious ones. Those are the global elites, the deep staters that always try to enslave people, like Honorable was saying here, that it's a conditioning of the mind. So now don't go out and say, this person is white, so I don't like them. Please don't do that. Okay? Don't do that. We have certain that always disturb our peace in Africa, and those are the ones that we're pointing out to. In addition, I also want to say something. Let's learn to pray for our nations. Because if we don't pray for our nations, we will lack wisdom on how to deal with the situations that are happening in our nations. If you read the Bible, it will tell you that the Roman Empire was completely destroyed. Do you know why? We had apostles that were praying. Politics is also there in the Bible. So we need to have the right wisdom, all this education that we're receiving, so that it doesn't go to waste. Right? We're going to do that. And then I also want to challenge the organizers of this amazing conference. Could you then help us start the so-called think tank in Africa? Because I believe you're well connected to different institutions and organizations within the African continent. We've got very intelligent people here. We could have that think tank. What do you think? That is not sponsored by the United States or European Union or something like that. Let me tell you, Europe is well spent. There's absolutely nothing. We have the rare earths that they are busy speaking about between Washington and Ukraine, signing deals. We are the owners of it, so we'll take charge. Thank you so much to my panelists. I am so honored to be sitting with these great people. It's so amazing. Thank you so much. And to a lovely audience, thank you so much for being here today. God bless you.